The world's richest man once controlled nearly every drop of oil flowing across the planet. One man. One empire. John D. Rockefeller. Yet, in the shadows of London's bustling docks, a quiet immigrant saw a flaw, a single weak link in the seemingly unbreakable chain. With no wells, no refineries, no armies of workers, he turned the empire on its head. One ship. One idea. That was all it took to start a chain reaction that would redraw the map of global power. By the end of his life, the company he built would be worth billions, influence nations, and yet, ironically, touch some of the darkest corners of human history. How did a man so small in resources manage to topple giants? The answer lies in the invisible machinery of trade, risk, and vision. To understand why this story matters, we need to step back. In the late 19th century, oil was no longer a commodity, it was the secret lifeblood of modernity. Factories, railroads, and navies ran on it. Cities lit up at night because of it. Economies rose and fell with its flow. Whoever controlled oil didn't just control a product, they controlled the pulse of the industrial world. And Rockefeller, through Standard Oil, held that pulse in his iron grip. Most people think empires are built on land, on drilling rights, on refineries. But the truth is more subtle, and more dangerous. The real power didn't lie in the oil beneath the ground, it lay in moving it across oceans. Across borders, faster and cheaper than anyone else. The choke points were shipping routes, storage capacities, and logistics. A single misstep could sink a company faster than any competitor's price war. And it was in this gap, invisible to many, that a young immigrant saw opportunity. Marcus Samuel, born into a modest Jewish family in Baghdad, arrived in London with little more than ambition and a knack for trade. His family ran a small import-export business, handling everything from spices to seashells. Samuel observed that the global oil industry was a behemoth, expensive, inefficient, and vulnerable. And he realized something crucial. The giant Rockefeller empire had blind spots, and he could exploit them without confronting the giant directly. The story of Samuel begins not with oil, but with shells. The family business, trading decorative shells for collectors, taught him something essential about commerce. Perception often mattered as much as product. In 1890s London, Samuel saw the world opening up through new canals, new trade agreements, and expanding industrial demand. Kerosene, a byproduct of crude oil, had become a necessity for lighting homes across Europe and Asia. But shipping it was cumbersome. Barrels leaked, production was inconsistent, and railroads added layers of cost. The market was ripe for disruption. At the same time, the Suez Canal had just opened. It promised to cut thousands of miles off the journey to Asia. But authorities feared transporting flammable oil through a narrow waterway. Samuel, however, saw the canal not as a barrier, but as a tool. He would convince insurers, regulators, and financiers to trust a vision that no one else dared attempt. Meanwhile, Rockefeller's Standard Oil remained focused on land-based domination, pipelines, refineries, and U.S. market control. Their gaze rarely fell on the global maritime stage. Samuel's insight was deceptively simple. If he could move oil faster and cheaper than the competition, he could create leverage that no refinery or landowner could match. He commissioned ships unlike anything the world had seen, tankers capable of carrying oil in bulk, not barrels. These vessels slashed costs, reduced losses, and made markets accessible that had once been unreachable. Here's where the story enters the realm of finance, power, and unseen levers. Money in oil doesn't flow linearly, it flows through efficiency, risk management, and the capacity to scale. Samuel realized that controlling oil meant controlling the flow, not necessarily the source. By reducing transport costs per unit, he could sell at lower prices without sacrificing profit. That cost advantage became a moat. He secured funding through connections in London's financial circles, including influential families who understood global trade. With capital in hand, Samuel leveraged both innovation and calculation. Bulk shipping allowed him to undercut competitors, and safe passage through the Suez Canal expanded his reach eastward. Suddenly, markets in India, Southeast Asia, and China were within reach, places Standard Oil could not easily penetrate. This was industrial arbitrage at its purest. Samuel didn't need to own oil fields in Texas or Venezuela immediately. He needed contracts, logistics, and speed. One shipment after another, the system compounded. Economies of scale, insurance guarantees, and shipping safety ratings became the invisible machinery that created real-world power. Money, in this system, followed efficiency. And efficiency followed vision. The real turning point arrived with the Texas oil boom of the early 1900s. Fields erupted with production. Barrels flooded the market. Prices plummeted. Rockefeller tightened his grip at first, but Samuel was ready. He had already scaled his shipping network. Shell could transport oil directly to markets that Standard Oil had assumed were out of reach. For a fleeting moment, the monopoly appeared vulnerable, yet, the challenge was immense. Texas's boom quickly turned to scarcity. Oil fields dried up as fast as they appeared, leaving portions of Samuel's fleet idle. Rockefeller still controlled pipelines, refineries, and domestic infrastructure. Survival was no longer guaranteed. Samuel needed more than shipping efficiency. He needed alliances, strategy, and managerial skill. In 1907, Samuel executed a masterstroke. He merged Shell with Royal Dutch, combining capital, resources, and expertise. The deal balanced ownership, preserved British legal oversight, and paired shipping strength with production knowledge. Suddenly, a challenger capable of rivaling Standard Oil on multiple fronts emerged. This merger was not merely business, it was a strategic recalibration of global oil power. Post-merger, Shell's influence spread rapidly. Oil fields in Venezuela and Mexico secured long-term supply. Tankers threaded through canals and oceans with precision. By World War I, petroleum had become a strategic weapon, and Shell was there, supplying fuel for navies, armies, and industrial campaigns. The war underscored a critical lesson: global logistics could rival production in importance. Meanwhile, Standard Oil faced antitrust litigation in the United States. Its domestic empire fractured under legal scrutiny. Shell, meanwhile, expanded internationally, unencumbered by the regulatory hand pressing down on Rockefeller. The immigrant who began with Shells had built a system that could survive political pressure, economic shocks, and even global conflict, but progress carried consequences. By the 1930s and 40s, Shell's global reach placed it in morally complex and dangerous positions. Subsidiaries found themselves entangled in authoritarian regimes, supplying resources that fueled conflict. Samuel had passed away decades before, yet the infrastructure he built enabled decisions that would touch lives in ways he could never have imagined. The tools of efficiency, logistics, and transport proved immoral. The same systems that brought wealth also carried human cost. This story is not merely historical trivia. It is a lesson in hidden leverage. Modern markets are built on the same invisible machinery. Control over movement of goods, capital, or information can outweigh ownership of assets themselves. Look at tech companies today. Servers, bandwidth, and algorithms function as pipelines. Logistics, contracts, and network effects often define winners before the product even reaches consumers. Samuel's story also reminds us that innovation is rarely about invention alone. It is about seeing gaps, calculating risk, and exploiting inefficiencies. Oil may seem mundane compared to Silicon Valley startups, yet the principles are timeless. One person's vision, applied to the right system, can disrupt giants, rewrite markets, and influence geopolitics. Moreover, the moral lesson endures. Infrastructure, efficiency, and power carry responsibility. Systems built for profit can be turned toward good, or toward unimaginable harm. Samuel's empire enabled global trade, yet its successors participated in ethical tragedies. Understanding that duality is essential for anyone navigating finance, industry, or power today. So, when you think of a single ship threading the Suez Canal, remember, it was never about the ship itself. It was about vision, leverage, and the unseen threads of money and logistics. One man, a Jewish immigrant with nothing but insight, turned those threads into power that Rockefeller could not contain. That lesson echoes across centuries. Control the flow, master the system, and the giants will stumble. The empire of Standard Oil may have seemed untouchable, but the subtle genius of one outsider changed the rules forever. The next time you hear about oil, logistics, or global trade, ask yourself, who really controls the pulse of the world? And how many empires are quietly vulnerable, waiting for the right person to see the gaps they cannot?